Good to see you today. We're going to be looking at the account of when Jezebel dies in our study. Our hymn is called The Way of the Righteous and the Wicked. It's an Isaac Watts hymn.
Blessed is the man who shuns the place where sinners love to meet, who fears to tread their wicked ways and hates the stubborn sleep. Sinners in judgment shall not stand among the sons of grace, when Christ the judge at his right hand appoints his strength ablaze. If I behold the path they tread, his heart approves it well, but crooked ways of sinners lead down to the gates of hell.
The Way of the Righteous and the Wicked. Our passage is 2 Kings chapter 9 today, verse 30. Now when Jehu had come to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it, and she put paint on her eyes and adorned her head and looked through a window. Let's pause for a moment. Who is Jehu? So, when Elijah, not Elisha, when Elijah had run from Jezebel after Mount Carmel, the Lord had told Elijah, go back to Damascus, and you're going to appoint 3 people. You're going to appoint Elisha as prophet in your place, which he does that almost immediately. Then he says you're going to anoint Hazael, king over Syria. You're going to anoint, the king of Israel, Jehu. You're going to anoint Jehu, king over Israel. And that one's an interesting one. We've been studying through the kings here in North Ridgeville on Wednesday nights. Jehu is actually in the lineage of the southern kingdom, and yet he is anointed king over the northern tribes by Elisha. Okay, so the Lord tells him as well at that time. Let me turn over there. And again, he's speaking to Elijah, and this is 1 Kings chapter 19 at verse 17. It shall be that whoever escapes the sword of Hazael, Jehu will kill, and whoever escapes the sword of Jehu, Elisha will kill. Jehu, his role was to eliminate Ahab's house. That was one of his roles. And he does that. If you've ever studied the account of Jehu's a warrior. And there's a lot of killing in these chapters. And one of them who is killed is Jezebel. So, when Jehu had come to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it, and she put paint on her eyes and adorned her head and looked through a window. Then as Jehu entered at the gate, she said, Is it peace, Zimri, murderer of your master? And he looked up at the window and said, Who is on my side? Who? So 2 or 3 eunuchs looked out at him. Then he said, Throw her down. So they threw her down, and some of her blood spattered on the walls and on the horses, and he trampled her underfoot. And when he had gone in, he ate and drank. Then he said, Go now, see to this accursed woman. Bury her, for she was a king's daughter. So they went to bury her, but they found no more of her than the skull, and the feet and the palms of her hands. Therefore they came back and told him, and he said, This is the word of the Lord which he spoke by his servant Elijah the Tishbite, saying, On the plot of ground at Jezreel dogs shall eat the flesh of Jezebel, and the corpse of Jezebel shall be as refuse on the surface of the field, and the plot at Jezreel so that they shall not say, Here lies Jezebel. Okay. So in thinking about Jezebel's demise, so when Jehu had come to Jezreel, and Jehu has already started killing, so Jezebel, I would suggest, she kind of knows what's coming. And so when she heard that Jehu had come to Jezreel, she put paint on her eyes and adorned her head. She got all dolled up. And in my notes, I put, you're just going to go out in a blaze, aren't you? And it's an amazing thing. Like she's an older, I believe she's an older woman at this time. And it's like, if I'm going to go out, I'm at least going to go out looking good. It's like, no, you're just going out. But that's how some people are. They know they're doomed. But they sure do want to look good. About outward appearances. I don't know if that's exactly what's going on here, but she's making herself up, is what she's doing. Not only does she make herself up, she sticks her head out the window. And she says to Jehu, "Is it peace, Zimri, murderer of your master?" Zimri was the name of a former king. And the way Zimri became king was Zimri had killed the king before him. That is what had happened. So she's hurling to her last breath. There's a science fiction movie back years ago, back in the late 70s or the early 80s, and the bad guy in the movie says, "With my last breath I spit at thee." I believe he's actually quoting something else, if I remember correctly. But that's kind of how Jezebel is. With my last breath, I'm going to hurl one more insult at you. And that's how some people are too. They are spiteful and bitter to the end. And that's Jezebel. So, Jehu looks up at the window and he says, "Who's on my side?" And I'm sure Jezebel probably thought, well, these are my eunuchs and they do what I say. And I've got a feeling those 2 or 3 eunuchs, they looked out at him, and I think it's implied there was some sort of understanding. Because the next thing you know, Jehu says, "Throw her down." And they're the ones who threw her down. And that's where she dies. One of the things about this that I didn't mention in class, if you happen to be in that class and watching this video, he says, when they come back and they say there wasn't enough of her to bury, he says, "This is the word of the Lord which he spoke by his servant Elijah the Tishbite, saying, on the plot of ground at Jezreel, dogs shall eat the flesh of Jezebel." You know where she was? Let's go back to 1 Kings, see if we can find it. So, chapter 19, Elijah flees Jezebel. Ahab. Naboth's vineyard. Naboth had the vineyard that was in Jezreel, next to the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. So where's Jezebel at when she dies? She looks out the window of what? She looks out the window of the palace. This is where she's at. So Naboth is killed. Naboth is stoned. Right? If you're familiar with that account. And then the Lord, and by the way, and Jezebel's the one who's responsible for that. She wrote letters in Ahab's name, sealed them with his seal, and sent the letters to the elders and the nobles who were dwelling in the city of Naboth. They lied about him, and he was stoned. And she says to Ahab, "Take possession of the vineyard. Naboth is dead." So Ahab got up and went down to take possession of the vineyard. And then the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, "You go down and you meet Ahab. There he is in the vineyard of Naboth. This is what you're going to tell him. Thus says the Lord, in the place where the dogs lick the blood of Naboth, dogs shall lick your blood, even yours." And I think specifically what he's talking about there, because Ahab dies elsewhere, actually. But I think it's right here. This is what Jehu is referring to. That's the prophecy. So all that's to say this: when you come up to 2 Kings and you read about Jezebel, pardon me, scroll, and you see how Jezebel was thrown out of that window. She was thrown out of that window, and that's where Naboth was stoned and killed. The vineyard was right next to the palace. That's why Ahab wanted it. It's like, okay, Jezebel, you got it. You got it. It's all yours. Matter of fact, we're just going to spread you all over it. And she's dead. She's dead at Naboth's vineyard. And so, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Jehu says, this is the word of the Lord, which he spoke by his servant Elijah the Tishbite, saying, on the plot of ground at Jezreel dogs shall eat the flesh of Jezebel. And they may have killed Naboth, but the Lord is the avenger. And Jezebel's dead. Ahab's already dead. And now Jezebel's dead. And just for the sake of saying it, Ahab's descendants are about to die. And Jehu does, at least as far as that goes, what the Lord wanted him to do. Destroy Ahab's family. And that's what happens. And so, the way of the righteous and the wicked. Sinners in judgment shall not stand. Among the sons of grace, when Christ the judge at his right hand appoints his saints a place. His eye beholds the path they tread, his heart approves it well. But crooked ways of sinners lead down to the gates of hell. And that's Jezebel. Appreciate you. Hope you have a good day. Join us tomorrow for another portion of our daily praise.